Imagine you had a time machine and you can go back to any time in your life from the moment you were born to just now. Okay, and then now, you know what I mean? And you can go at any time and you can visit yourself. You can even interact with yourself if you like. You can see yourself as a kid hanging out, playing with other kids. You can see yourself as that awkward teenager. Ugh. You can go as a young adult, maybe your first job. Maybe it's your first kiss, whatever it is. What part of you would you skip? Do you know what I'm asking? You may already have that in your head. What part of your life, what portion, what iteration of you feels that maybe you just maybe can't forgive that part, or maybe you cringe hard? I think we all have those. And in this episode of Seared, Stories from the Stove podcast, we're going to be talking about looking back, regret, why it can do you harm, and also how to deal with it so it doesn't consume you. So be right back, and we're going to jump right into it. Welcome to the show. My name is Paul Silva. I am a retired chef, a life coach. I dabble into many things, but I'm here for you. So you'll have to forgive me if my voice is a little hoarse. Everyone in the house is sick, and I was patient 0, so I feel a little bad. I am tending to everyone now that I'm starting to move through the illness. After this, I'm probably going to have to make a run to the pharmacy. We call it the pharmacy here in Canada. Maybe you call it the drugstore, the chemist, old school. But I'm going to have to pick up some meds and some Gatorade and all the fun stuff. Not that you needed to know that, but now you know. Put that in your journal. Make that an entry. So I am so thrilled that you're here. And, you know, one of the things that has always struck me is when I'm looking back on things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we all look back on things. I mean, we're human. But there's different feelings you have when you look back on something. You know what I'm saying? There's different emotions that rise up. And I was thinking about this earlier, and how, you know, sometimes you look back and it feels really good, and other times you feel back, it just feels terrible. And as I was just kind of laying this episode together in the map of my mind, I was trying to categorize these, right? And I wanted to share this with you because I think it's pretty cool, and because I learned something, and I want to share this with you. So when we're looking back on something, when you're feeling like, oh my God, that was so great, that's what we would call like nostalgia. So if there's like a scale, right? We have nostalgia on one end, and that's when you're a little sentimental, right? It's like, you're like, oh, wasn't it fun when we did this? And there's good, warm, fuzzy feelings. And then you kind of slip into the next stage, which is wistful, right? It's like you're looking back, but maybe there's a little bit of melancholy, right? It feels like, yes, but it's tinged with a little bit of sadness, maybe a little bit of what could have been. And then there's something, this is the thing I learned, there's something it's a German name, it's called Sehnsucht. Sorry if I butchered that, but I'm not German. I'm more of the romance language type. Sehnsucht. It's a yearning or a wistfulness, usually for things that are unfinished, and a desire to have like that alternate ending, right? The way it's like an unfinished thing, how things were left. It's like thoughts and feelings about missing aspects of your life, accompanied with a desire for the ideal or alternative states, if you will. To put it simply, it's a life longing, right? And so it's kind of like a deeper version of wistful. And I may have not explained it the best, but it's a little challenging to describe. But that's the closest I can get. It's that beyond wistful. And then at the opposite end, we have regret. The way I see regret, it's essentially a self-directed resentment. It's like a soul level disappointment that things didn't work out because of something you did or said or didn't do or say. And for these days, the last, not too long, like the last couple days, or it pops up now and then, I feel like I'm on the range of all of these, especially in the aspect of my culinary career, right? We're here to Seared, stove, stories. Like, this is my old career. And I was in there for 25 years. So it makes sense that I'm going to look back. There's going to be times where I get a little, scratch on the back of my brain saying, remember this, remember this. And many times it's nostalgic. Other times they're wistful. Other times Sehnsucht, and other times regret. And I was reading, this came to me because I was reading a story in online. It was in a magazine, 2019, about a chef that was really well known here in Toronto. And his story, reading about him, and I knew about him while I was, up and running. He predates me a little bit, but we didn't cross paths. I've never met him, but definitely we overlapped in terms of being on the scene. And this guy's story is wild. I mean, talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like, this was it. Like, how this guy is alive today, I don't know, but I'm glad he is. And he's got now he's clean and really gives back to the community. He's lived a life. Let's put it that way. And it just had me thinking, like, what if I could, like, how great would it have been if I did X, Y, Z? Maybe if I applied myself more. Maybe if I wasn't drinking so much, where would I have been? And that's where sometimes I take myself. And there's one thing in particular. There was a certification that I really wanted. It was the CCC, the Certified Chef de Cuisine. And it took time and resources and money to get set up with that and taking courses and all that. And the reality is, I was heavily into my drinking. That's the reality. And as much as I understood things and all this, I was not fully there. How could I have been? And I did the test, and I remember being so stressed, and I failed. I failed the written part, so I didn't even get to the final, like, cooking exam. And boy, did I feel crushed then. And I felt like a total failure. But I also knew I wasn't anywhere near where I could have been. So it was just something that, as I continued in my career, just like it just really gnawed at me. And I'd also see other chefs and how they achieved things, and seeing them in the spotlight. And I always felt like the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like, I always just missed being, in the spotlight, or I just missed an opportunity, or it was just never aligned for me. And again, because I thought I know I was talented. I know I was 100%. I know in my heart that I was very talented and had the chops, but I never landed in the right place at the right time. Well, according to my ego. I mean, we are all in the right place at the right time, if you know what I'm picking. If you understand what I'm saying, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. And when I look back, though, like through just objective eyes, or untinged with any regret or what ifs, I'm content. Like, I had a good run. And I don't sit in the regret very much, very rarely now. In the past, I did, 100%. I think for me, it's kind of like that Sehnsucht, sometimes bordering on regret, but not a lot. And I've done a lot of work around this. And I want to share with you some of the things that I've done. Because the what if game is a losing game. It's a total losing game. And this is something that I shared not too long ago online. And as an aside, I just want to share something. This goes back to even my blogging days. There's times that when I don't share just the highlights. I share all the things that are just like rumblings in my brain and soul. And when I share those things, and I share them because I want to connect with people and let them know they're not alone, just like I do here. And sometimes when I share things like this, when I have, let's say, I'm feeling a tinge of regret, or I'm feeling like a little down this day, or I'm feeling this, what sometimes gets missed is that, or misunderstood, is that I'm not like that every single moment of the day. When I share that, hey, I was kind of feeling this way, or sometimes people, they misread it and they feel like I'm like that all the time. Like I'm super depressed, I'm suicidal or something. Like, no, life is great. Life is great. But we all have these human moments where we look back and it's just a way of connecting. If I just shared everything that was great, to me, it'd be kind of boring. And someone on Threads, he shared, I couldn't find the quote anywhere, and I couldn't find his response, but he said something like, it was a quote from Beck, the musician, saying something along the lines of like, he writes one breakup song and people think for the next 6 years, people think that he's heartbroken the entire time. It's not the case at all. So it's just interesting. I share that there, and the kind of the responses I get. Here it's a bit different because I have more time and space to give you the context. So as I sit here thinking about what could have been, et cetera, it's not something I think of 99.9% of the day, probably 0.01. But I share this because I know we all, you listening or watching, no doubt have those moments. Maybe some of you more, maybe some of you less, maybe some none at all. But anyway, I just want to kind of give a little further context to that. When I think of the past, there's that famous quote, like, the past is a place of reference, not residence. And we understand what that means. Like, there's nothing wrong with looking back. But when you step into self-blame or guilt for what could have been, or you find you're just rehashing the same events over and over and over again, or you're beating yourself up for doing or not doing something, saying or not saying something, then you're stepping into regret country. And it's something that can come up again now and then. But if you find that it's starting to take over a bit, or even consuming you, then I want you to take note. See, when you're living in regret, you're affecting your own mental and physical health through stress, right? You're getting that cortisol. It can freeze you from doing things in the here and now. It can affect your decision-making, like positively and negatively, and I'll touch on that in a bit. And of course, it can bring sadness. It can bring perhaps some victimhood. It can bring an unwillingness to participate in your own life as much as you'd like to. Regrets and other resentments, because again, I feel resentments are regrets are a resentment towards self. They're like poison to the soul. They rot you from the inside out. And a lot of that is based on expectations. There's that quote, expectations are resentments waiting to happen. And I'm not going to get too much into resentments here because that can be a whole episode. But I find that resentments and regret kind of live in the same postal code. And, in recovery, in addiction recovery, a 12-step precisely to be more specific, resentment is considered the number one thing. It's the number one in terms of what fuels you. And I know, I didn't think I was an angry guy at all. Nice guy. I'm a nice guy. But when I got into recovery, I started doing the inner work. Ooh. I can't make that noise, by the way. I'm trying to do a flip knuckle thing. I can't make it. I was chock-a-block full of anger and resentment. Like just reams and reams of paper, just listing all my grudge list. And when I was in the midst of my active alcoholism, boy, oh boy, did I hold resentment to everybody, including myself, absolutely myself. There's that whole idea of drinking at someone. Like it's the whole idea of drinking poison, expecting them to die. And alcohol is poison, obviously. And I would be resentful towards other chefs who were succeeding. And I'd be looking at myself as like, why not me? Why not me? I should be. And looking at myself as the victim. Poor me, poor me, poor me. And again, that fueled the drinking more, which made me mess things up a lot more, to say the least. Which then took me off the path of improving myself, which then made the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be bigger. And then I'd get into resenting the other chefs who are actually doing the things that I could be doing. And I would lather, rinse, repeat that cycle of resentment. And of course, I would resent myself for drinking, for messing up, for all that. And those are the resentments. Now, you don't have to have been, in addiction to have resentments towards yourself. A lot of times it could be a job maybe that you passed up, or maybe someone you wanted to ask out, but you chickened out. Or it could have been maybe breaking up with someone that you needed to break up with. Whatever. There's so many reasons. Or you gave up, I was just thinking giving up something that you love doing. And you regret it later. Like, why didn't I keep doing that? Why didn't I just stay with the path? Why didn't I just move through the difficulty? We all have regrets. But the problem is, it erodes your soul. Because you're not getting yourself off the hook. You're not letting yourself off the hook. When you hold a resentment, you're holding it's like the sword of Damocles over your own head. And you're not allowing yourself the space for growth because you're handcuffing yourself to this idea, this story of what could have been. And because it didn't happen, now everything is ruined. And that's a lot of energy to carry. That's a lot to carry. So, as I'm talking, I still think of just how many people I really held a grudge against, that there was no need for me to hold a grudge against. I held a grudge against them because it was harder to look at myself. So it was easier for me to blame other people. And then when I did look at myself, it was with a harsh tongue and the tisk and drinking, because I didn't like that feeling. So what did I do? Well, first I got sober, but anyway, I'm going to give you a few tips on what's worked for me, because it's an ongoing thing, right? We're always continually working on ourselves. And I can totally get into regrets airspace without actually touching down. But, there is something about clearing the air. No pun intended. Okay, when we get back, I'm going to share some of those things to help you move past regret. Welcome back. Hope you got a nice beverage. Coffee, maybe. Coffee's life. You know me. I've always, speaking of alcohol and stuff, I've always joked that coffee would be harder for me to quit than alcohol. I don't know if that's quite true, but I don't know. Until a doctor says, if you have one more, your heart will explode. The first thought I'd be like, now if my heart explodes, will I still live? Because I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. And don't come at me with the mushroom thing. Mushrooms are not coffee. Just no, stop, full stop. Okay. So regrets, we've had a few, I was thinking like someone who like plays the lotto. It's the same numbers their entire life. And the 1 week they don't do it, those are the numbers that come up, right? Like there's like the nightmare fuel for people. And I can only imagine, I'm sure this has happened. I can only imagine what that's like for that person. And here's the reality. No matter what regret that you may harbor, or if you're kind of, whatever it is that you're playing in your mind over and over again, life is not over. It's not over, right? When you put your life on hold because of that, then that's different. It may feel like your life is over because you're not allowing yourself to move through this. And, when you just repeat over and over and over all this kind of stuff, you also strengthen it. You're giving it energy. So what do you do to help yourself, how to wrangle yourself out of this? So I'm going to give you 6 or 7 tips, things that, again, I have done, and hopefully this will help you. The first thing is acknowledging the feeling. You're saying, Paul, I do that all the time. No, acknowledge the feeling, but without the wallowing or the ruminating. A lot different, right? It's different. Like sometimes we get those feelings when something bubbles up. What do? We distract ourselves. We work, we get overworked, or we numb out, right? At least I know I can still do that. I get busy, so I don't have to feel the feels. But I'm inviting you to feel the feels. Sit with them. Acknowledge what's coming up without judging it. And that may be hard. Sometimes I'll write what comes up. See what's presented to you. Like put into actual words the feelings that are coming up. But again, without attaching to them. So for example, like I may think that I'm feeling anger, but really what I'm feeling is disappointment. And so sometimes I'll write that like, oh, because I'm sitting with it. I was talking to someone today, and we were talking about that time where things feel uncertain, uncomfortable, and we called it like holding the tension. So you're holding the tension. I think Jung actually came up with that term. But you're holding the tension, so you're not allowing one side to let go, because it's in that tension that you can pull things together. So allow yourself to feel and observe. Second is then to accept that you were doing the best you could with what you had. Now, when I look back, I mean, obviously I was dealing with like an acute chronic alcohol abuse situation. Of course, I wasn't going to make the best or most robust sound decisions for myself. I was operating like at a fraction of what I was capable of. And sometimes when I get the cringe, sometimes, I don't know about you, I'll be driving and I'll get the cringe. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I said that one day. I can't believe I did that. Oh, gosh. I get the cringe. And what I'll remember, what snaps me out of it is like, Paul, first of all, you're loved, and we love that old part of you. But that's who you were then. And you were doing the best you could with who you are and what you were capable of. And so I invite you to feel the same. And, you can't expect that you would have made decisions back then based on what you may know or have experienced now. We made our decisions, and that's it. And when you can accept that, then you're halfway there. 3 is self-forgiveness. And I mean, I've shared this, I believe, several times here. Self-forgiveness, huge. This is something that will come up often as I share more and more on this podcast, because it's such a powerful thing, right? You like show yourself the compassion you would show a loved one or a friend who may have been in the same situation. Or you can flip it. So what you can do is maybe channel a loving person from your childhood or someone now, like someone who really loved you or loves you, who adored you, adores you, and think about what they would say, right? Would they still love you no matter what? Of course they would. What would they say? So think about what their response would be, and see if you can start to internalize that voice and not the inner critic who's constantly like, laying hands on you and beating you up every moment it can. So just channel that loving voice. 4th is make amends if you have harmed someone. And I feel like I've talked about this too, but essentially amends is not just saying sorry. That's not what amends is. It's not asking for forgiveness. Making amends is coming to someone saying, I did this. This is what I did. This is how I harmed you. And saying what it is. And then if you want to go a step further, say, what else do I need to know? How else have I harmed you? And let them talk. That's when you shut up. Shut up. And you let them have their peace. And then you ask, how can I make this right? See, nowhere in there are you asking for forgiveness or saying sorry. How can I make this right? And then the key is in amends is amending the behavior. That's what amends are. Or else you're just, I don't know, you're just having a chat. And so if you have made some harms in the past, depends on how long ago and whatnot, if you can, make the amend. Fifth, now start looking, this is where you can start looking at the upside of regret. Upside, what's that? Shush. So regret, like, what lesson did it teach you? What values are they pointing out to you that can help you from this point on? How will that regret help you in making future decisions? So for example, for me, missing out on getting that certification showed me that I valued learning. I valued accomplishment. I valued developing myself. Now, while I have no need or desire to get that certification now, I can still take courses. I can still get certifications in other areas that interest me now. I have that choice. So look at where these regrets are pointing. Like, use all of this as information. Anything that happens is information. I had a running coach, and one pivotal thing that she had said was, she was asking about pains and aches and all that. And I started going, she goes, good, that's information. And I was like, oh, I never thought of it that way. I was just complaining about my knee hurts and my, that's information. And so anytime you're feeling pain, it's information. What do you want to do with that? 6, stop exaggerating or overestimating how big an impact your decision or words in the past would have changed things. Because again, we play things over and over, and we focus, we make things bigger, we skew things. And, let's say perhaps it was a job. Let's say you passed up a job or whatnot. Perhaps you thought that the job, right, would have changed your life forever and would have made you gobs of money and you would have been like the happiest person ever. But maybe that job would have taken you away from your family and friends. Maybe you would have quit in 2 months. Maybe you would have burnt out. Who knows? We don't know, but you're just going on an assumption. Or maybe that love of your life that you never asked out, maybe could have ended up being a toxic and unhappy person. Who knows how long you would have lasted? I don't know. The point is, you just don't know. And so you can make up the stories in your head, which we do. And you come up with like I said, you over exaggerate or you overestimate how impactful, but maybe in the grand scheme of things, that would have been just a small piece of the puzzle. You just don't know. But what you do know, what you can do is you can take charge of things now. Because if you don't, then you'll never go anywhere. And again, for me, in the end, that certification, it probably wouldn't have made a huge difference anyway, because I wouldn't have left my last job because I absolutely loved it. And now as a retired chef, it matters even less. Who cares? 7, this is the last one. Use the regret as a motivator to take actions now. Channel that energy of what could have been into what can be. And there's power in that. There's power in taking that, like transmuting that energy into something that you can use. So again, getting that information, we can flip it, shift it, and make it something worthwhile. It's powerful, guys. I can't tell you any more than that. Those are the things that have helped me. Do with them what you will. And I know they're easier said than done. Absolutely. Even as I'm saying this, I'm like, wow, that was actually really hard when I did that. Or that took me weeks. That took me months. And that was just my work. But it's work. And, I don't share these things. Most 95% of the things, 90% of the things I share here are things I've done. And still do. Like, progressing is never ending. We're always working ourselves, and that's a beautiful thing. We get to do it. And, I don't share these things just to sound like some Wikipedia entry to sound smart. These are things I've had to do to find more peace and space in my life, and I really want that to give that gift to you. So, my hope and wish is that even doing one thing Implementing one idea into your life can move the needle 1%. And if it's a little bit more, great. But if even moving that needle 1% is huge. Now, speaking of moving the needle, I would love if you could share, comment, like, subscribe to the podcast. We are about 140 subs on YouTube. I think 30 subs on iTunes. I'm not sure. Anyways, I would love to get that going, team. Let's make a splash with this podcast, and I need your help. Can't do it alone. Let others know that you're watching or listening. Maybe share on social media. That would make this hombre very, very happy. All right. This, I don't know, this episode might be some I'll look back on with fondness, with nostalgia, maybe. And I hope you do too. So, kitchen's closed. Now scram.